You're listening to the 95 Podcast from the team at 95 Network, where we host conversations specifically designed to support leaders in small and mid-sized churches.
Hey everyone, this is Dale Sellers, Executive Director at 95 Network, and welcome to our podcast. Today, I have a very special guest who's on the other side of the country, Vivica Keyes, who lives near Orange County, California. If you need to know where she lives, it's just near Disney over there. And I had the opportunity to meet her recently through our friend Nicole. And as we talked together and we were discussing some things about podcasts and different things like that, she started kind of sharing with me her story, and I just thought, wow, we need to share her story with our audience. And so, Vivica, welcome to the 95 Podcast.
Well, good morning. I should say good afternoon to you.
Well, actually, it's afternoon here, but it's morning still there, correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for having me on your show.
Well, how's the weather in sunny California today?
Well, it rained Sunday, but it looks like it's going to be in the 80s this weekend. So it's good so far.
Well, that's a lot different than what's going to happen here. We're getting down into the 40s this weekend, which is the first time that's happened this year. So welcome to South Carolina weather.
Yes.
Well, you and I had connected recently talking about doing podcasts and things like that. And as we talked, you began to share with me your story. And I've done several things in this arena throughout the last couple of years in 95 Network, and I want to continue to do it. And I just felt like your story would be very, very special to share with our people. So if you would, just take a moment and tell us your story.
Well, I've been in California all my life. And so I've been in ministry now for over 20 years. And I was writing children's books for a number of years and serving in children's ministry. And I was ordained a few years back now and transitioned over to working with more adults. And fast forward to being at home one night, and I think it was January 23rd of 2017 or 18 now. And I was at home and an intruder came into my home at about 3:00 in the morning.
Oh, no.
Yes, about 3:00 in the morning, I heard this noise, and this guy came into my house. I was here alone, and I encountered him in the living room, and he grabbed me. I fought him off, was able to get out of the house, and went through the whole legal thing afterwards as far as being the victim of that crime.
Mm-hmm.
And in the aftermath, I had an opportunity to look back.
Mm-hmm.
And I had an opportunity to just kind of sit before the Lord and that question, why? How did this happen? What was I supposed to learn out of this? And I knew that it was more than just to be afraid, that that's not what the ending story was going to be. And so I began to ask other people who had gone through a traumatic event, what was that like? How did people respond to you? What did you feel? Did you feel heard? And as a result, I started to realize that there was a commonality in all of us. Mm-hmm. And that was that people didn't really know how to respond to us. They would kind of say things like, you're going to be okay. And especially in my case, because I was in ministry, they would tell me, oh, you have a relationship with Jesus and you're going to be okay. And that was true. The problem was that going to be was way ahead of me in my future somewhere. And it wasn't in my right now. And so I began to ask myself questions of, what other people felt like and what I felt like. And fast forward, I ended up writing a book, Valor to Victory. And the first series was Removing the Drama from Your Trauma, where I asked other people to tell me their stories and to be able to, actually it's twofold or maybe threefold, where I want to know what happened to you. I want to know how you made it through it. And then in hindsight, what can you tell us and what did you learn from that experience so that it can help the person that may be going through something similar. It can also educate someone who's trying to walk alongside that person.
Do you mind kind of talking a little bit about that night? I mean, I have 1,000 questions. So the first question is, did you live in an area where that was common?
Oh, no, nothing like that had ever happened around here.
And did you know the intruder?
No, I didn't. It was a random person driving down the street, and apparently he had been in the car with someone and he got spooked, is what the law enforcement people told me is that he got spooked. We assumed there was drugs involved. And he jumped out of the car and literally ran through the neighborhood and saw my house. And I don't know how, but he jumped through the window. And it's a high window because it was a small kitchen window. It's not like he jumped through a picture window.
Was the window open?
No, well, he jumped through the window.
Oh, he broke it.
He didn't open it. He just literally, and it's over the sink. It's the window over the sink. So you know how those are windows that are up high.
Yeah, he's running from the law as far as he's concerned.
No,
he's not. Okay.
He was just in the car and got spooked because they were doing drugs in the car.
Oh, okay.
He had a bad experience, started having mind games, I guess, and he jumped out of the car. And somehow my house is in the middle of the block, and I guess that's when it happened. And he jumped through the window.
And so you wake up to hearing glass broken.
Yes.
And you said you're by yourself, so no one else is in the home.
Yes.
And so, I mean, I can't fathom it because just coming out of a deep sleep and that happening. What took place? I mean, as much as you can talk about what took place when you confronted him.
Well, first of all, I didn't know that anyone was in my house because what I heard was glass shattering and what sounded like a crash. Okay. So my first instinct was to look out the window, and I saw the car.
Okay.
Burning rubber, doing a 3-point turn and turning away. So my assumption was that car had just hit a parked car.
Gotcha.
I never imagined that it was someone coming into my house. Okay. So I got up and I went into the kitchen, and the water was running in the sink. And so I didn't hear anything, didn't see anyone. And I looked at the counter and I saw a couple of little pieces or little drops of red, something on the counter. Didn't hear anyone, didn't see anything. And I had time to pick up the phone, go back into my bedroom, grab my robe, and think, let me call 911. And I'm in my mind, I'm thinking this is going to be a non-emergency. I'm going to be sitting up all night waiting for them to come because somebody's throwing something through my window. That's what I thought.
Okay.
Went back and forth in there, and it took a couple of times before I actually saw that this red stopped in the kitchen, and then I saw some more in the dining room, and that's what made me come out of the kitchen. And then I stepped into the dining room, and then in the living room, there was a dark figure, and it was the man.
And he was bleeding. Was he?
I didn't know he was bleeding then.
Was he trying to hide from you? Or was he preparing to attack you?
He was hallucinating. So he was standing there staring at the ceiling, looking at his hands. Clearly, he didn't know where he was.
Okay.
And then he did come towards me, and then he did grab me, and I was able to fight him off. And at some point, I promise you, I heard the Holy Spirit say, "Stop fighting. He's not fighting you."
Okay.
And so I'm fighting him with everything that I have. Yeah, I'm fighting him. And when I stopped fighting him, he had his hands up defending himself from me.
Because you beating him up.
I'm doing my best.
Adrenaline kicked in, did it?
Yes. I was grateful for those 6-foot brothers I had.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I, when I realized that, I started to back away from him. And I realized I still had the phone in my hand. So I was trying to dial 911 while I'm trying to yell at him to get out of the house. And he was standing there. And so I thought, I need to get out of the house then. So I backed up and I was telling him to go. By this time, I've gotten the dispatch on the phone, and I'm telling them there's someone in my house. I was able to go through the den, go out the sliding door through the patio, and I ran across around the house and ran across the street to my neighbor and bammed on his door. And, it's 3:00 in the morning. Yeah. So he's startled and he's like, "What's wrong?" He always called me baby girl. He's like, "Baby girl, what's wrong? What's wrong?" And I told him, "Somebody's in my house. Somebody's in my house." And at that time, the lights and sirens and helicopters and everything was here instantly.
Wow. And then I'm assuming they called him pretty quickly.
He was in the house. And
he's still in the house.
He was in the house, but I think he must have opened the door because when they asked me how could they get in, I told them that I had just gone out through the sliding glass door so they could go around the back. But he came out the front door, and they didn't break the door down. And they laid him in the front yard. And I did ask if I could see him because I'd had some work done around the house. And I started wondering, was this someone who maybe had been with the contractor and saw something? But I had never seen this kid. He was 29 years old. I had never seen him before.
Wow. How do you process this? Here you are, you're a single lady, or by yourself anyway, and you're there, and that happens. And then the police come, and then are you supposed to go back to bed? I mean, what'd you do next?
Well, I didn't get a chance to go back to bed because then the law enforcement officer came back, said they had found the car that the young man had jumped out of. And so that they knew it was the car. They said they found his phone and a shoe. And so then to my surprise, they came back another time about 20 minutes later, and they brought his parents to my house. They went and got his parents, brought his parents to my house and tried to, I guess, coerce me not to press charges.
Really?
Yes.
The law did?
Yes.
I don't understand. Do you know
I didn't
why?
either. No, I don't know. I still to this day don't know how and why that was allowed.
Wow, that seems odd. That seems
Yes,
very
it
odd.
was. It was. It was.
Okay,
It
so
was. It
here.
was offensive.
Oh, it would be. It would be. I'd be livid. But anyway, so then they finish up. So now the mornings come along. How do you get yourself back together?
I don't know that I did. I think I was in shock, if you will, that
Yeah, I'm sure you were.
I was on autopilot where I knew I needed to stay up and wait. I started calling. I called my cousin was the only person that I called. She's my best friend. My mom, and has deceased, and to where I knew my immediate family would have responded differently, and I wasn't prepared to manage them. I needed to have somebody who could be stable. So that's my cousin is my rock in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
So she came over, and my neighbor was still here with me. And so I stayed up and I waited until I could find a company to come and board up the window, and the police were in and out throughout the night. So there is another side to this too, is that the young man was white. And so me being an African-American woman, I had all of these issues, especially with them bringing his parents to my house. And I'm thinking, you wouldn't have done this under ordinary circumstances. Now, the other side to this is I am an insurance agent, and I worked in law enforcement for the last 10 years prior to that. So I knew captains at every station. So I had a relationship with the department, and it just got really ugly because of all of those different things. It caused me to have to completely change my career path and leave that department, and go to another area.
All right, I'm not letting you move past that. Why is it getting ugly? You were the one that was victimized. Why was it getting ugly? Are they wanting to cover this up? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, they did. It was heartbreaking to me. And let me just say this. I had some of the captains tell me that they were so sorry that I was going through this because I had supported them and been with them for years. And so they knew me. So it's not a blanket statement, but in this particular incident, I don't know what happened. I ended up filing a complaint with Internal Affairs, and they actually sent me a letter that they agreed that my charges were validated, which is a very rare thing. I ended up on the news where it was like, this happened to this person, and why did I never got an answer for it. Fast forward, for the sake of time, we went through a court system and the whole thing, and the courts ended up dismissing the whole thing under qualified immunity.
I don't know what that means.
Qualified immunity means that anything you do in uniform is pretty much okay. So They said that, yeah, and because I felt like she tried the whole case in my front yard. That there's a privacy law that says, as a victim, even if I go to court, my address is supposed to be blacked out so that the people that they can't see you and find you. So the fact that she went and got his parents, who I don't know, live in another city. They don't even live in the same town I live in.
Can I assume that they must have been people who of reputation that needed their reputation not to be tarnished? Is that what you think, or or?
Dale, I have no idea, because I even wrote to the Attorney General's office, and they did a little I don't know how deep of a dive, but they did follow up with me. They couldn't find that this family had ever even made a contribution. Okay. So they couldn't find any connection. So I really don't know.
Well, I wanted all the strange details, if you will, because I think it adds more to the impact of what you do today and what your ministry is. But you and I talked about this when we met. You've had a traumatic event, and the thing about trauma is, as we talked about, is trauma just doesn't disappear. If you have one trauma, you can have another trauma, but it doesn't replace the last one. It just builds on top of it. So tell me, what were the days and the weeks ahead after this? What was it like for you? And again, you're in ministry at this time, so I'm assuming most people who cannot relate to what you've been through are saying things like, Oh, just give it to the Lord. He's got it. Just trust the Lord and just have faith. The stuff people say because they don't know what to say. Was that
Right,
your
right.
experience?
Yes, it was. So to the point where I stopped telling people.
Really?
Yes, because I was angry, and then I became defensive. When people would say it, I would shut them down and say, "Stop telling me that.
Mm-hmm.
I know that. Stop telling me that. I understand. I didn't lose my faith, but that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean I'm not afraid. That doesn't mean that I'm not angry. That doesn't mean, the feelings that I had were real, and I kept feeling like people were dismissing them.
Okay,
Now,
so that's where that was coming from when you were saying stop telling me that. It was because they're being insensitive to what you really feel. And is that what I want to make sure I understand where that's coming from?
I believe so. I
Yeah.
believe that they may have been uncomfortable, and like you said, maybe didn't know what else to say.
Mm-hmm.
And so but now I did have my core group. I had a core group, and I had a great insurance company. My
Okay.
insurance company, because there was blood damage, I learned all of this stuff, that blood is a hazardous material. So therefore, they moved me out of my house in a hotel room for about 2 weeks while the hazardous material people came through. I had just kind of remodeled my house. I lost everything. They had to take everything that the blood touched because they said it can't be cleaned. It has to be destroyed.
Okay.
So then I went through the court process, and I'll never forget one specific incident in court when I saw the young man, and I have to say this before I forget. The young man was a tall, thin guy, and actually seeing him in person helped me,
Mm-hmm.
because all I remember was this dark figure in
Yeah.
the night. When I saw him in person, he was a kid. I mean, he was 29,
Yeah.
but he was a young man who, and honestly, had they come to me, I would not have tried to destroy his life, but I felt like they disregarded that I was the victim in the case. And they
Yeah.
even told me we had to protect him. We had to make sure he was okay. That's what they told me. And then when I went to court, the judge, looking at the list of the items that had been damaged, I had a rug. It was $1,100 rug. And the judge said, $1,100 for a rug? That's excessive. I'm not including that. Mind you, I had the actual receipt because I had just bought it.
Can I say you're in California, right? This sounds very California to a South Carolinian. I'm gonna leave that at that. It's like
So,
everybody's turned on you and you didn't do anything wrong.
no, no.
Okay.
They asked me, why did I replace the garbage disposal? Why didn't we just take the glass out? I mean, ridiculous questions, like I was the one that had done something wrong.
Mm-mm-mm.
So, yeah, it was difficult. Dale, it was very difficult. And then there was this period where I stopped telling people, just because when you're in this condition, what I learned is you're very defensive, or at
Mm-hmm.
least I was.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to be a victim a second time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's at that careful time where you can't approach me a certain kind of way, because I'm going to snap back, because I'm already on guard. I'm
Mm-hmm.
staying up late at night. I'm not sleeping. I have everything that could possibly be a weapon sitting around me, and I'm sitting up in my bed. And I was so glad. I only did that for the first night, and then the insurance company moved me out. And I was really grateful for that down period of not being here. And when it was time for me to come home, I had one of my best friends said, "What time are you going home?" And I told her, and I said, "Why?" She said, "Because I'm going to be there."
Amen.
And she stayed with me. Yeah. So then I had my other friend who, "Are you going to court?" She says, "I'm going to take off." And she's a lawyer. She said, "I'll take off from work and I'm going to trial with you." I had another friend who every day she worked near me, and she came and sat with me. So those people that just knew how to show up and
Yeah.
just let me be. I didn't have to talk about it, but just not let me be alone and just be here with me. Those are the people I'm grateful for.
You said you didn't want to become a victim again. Dive into that a little bit more. Is it just the emotional part? What does that really mean?
It means that's not the time to cross me in any way. That's
Okay.
not the time, because you're real sensitive to somebody taking advantage of you.
Mm-hmm.
So something that I might have ignored the day before that happened, I would turn around and say, "Why did you do that, Dale? You don't have to do that to me." I was just defensive and shutting things down. And I had to realize that, and I mean, I came to realize it in myself, that that's what I was doing.
Okay.
But I just felt I was on guard. I was protecting everything around me and that lasted for probably the first month almost, that I was just really ultra sensitive to things. And I mean, especially what was going on with law enforcement. And so I wasn't
Yeah.
being treated fairly there either. So, yes.
Did you immediately, did you keep working? Did you take some time off? Did you just jump right back into the routine of life? What was the timeline once the attack had happened that you did that?
Fortunately, I'm self-employed. So I was able to kind of navigate a little bit.
Mhm.
There was a 3 month period between 3 or 4 month period, 4 months between the time that it happened and the time that it hit the news.
Okay.
And because there ended up being it ended up having to go to court. So then it was breaking news. That was the oddest thing because I'm literally in the house and you're going breaking news, and I turn around and it's me on TV. So, and lights in
Yeah,
my
it was
front yard.
breaking news, but that was 4 months ago.
Well, the breaking news was that there was going to be a suit against the law enforcement department because of what they had done and how
Yeah.
they hadn't protected my privacy. So that was more of the news. But yeah, it was an ordeal. I had the flexibility to kind of adjust my schedule, and then honestly, I kind of needed the people that I work with. My clients, I've been with them. I've been in, like I said, I've been in the insurance business now for over 25 years.
Mhm.
So some of my clients are just so phenomenal that they didn't know.
Yeah.
So when they would call me before it hit the news, that is, and to where if I could handle it, I would say, hey, no problem, let me do this for you. Or I would say, you know what, a colleague of mine, I'm going to have her call you because I had somebody else on standby
Sure.
to handle things for me.
Okay. Well, I thank you for reliving a lot of that. But I wanted folks to know the real details of what it's like, because we are so guilty in the church world of putting a Band-Aid over things like this. We've been guilty of it my whole lifetime. I'm 61. We've been guilty of just putting a Band-Aid over traumatic events. Until recently, in the last 2 or 3 years, it's the first time I've ever even had conversations about trauma and as far as what it does to us. And so that's why I focused on this some in ministry. I had my own traumatic experiences that I shared with you as well. And so that's why I wanted to kind of really know the background. I wanted people to understand this is a real life situation where, first of all, you didn't do anything wrong. And then those who were supposed to stand up with you and stand up for you actually turned against you. And then, the people you need to rely on the most, the church world, they just give you the pat answers, which don't work. But I also am encouraged by the fact that you didn't have Job's friends. You had some real friends who kind of help guide you through that. So what we want to do, I'm going to take a little short break, and we come back. I want to talk more about what you're doing today and your ministry today. So we'll take a short break. We'll be right back.
Okay.
Back here with Vivica. I'm still kind of dealing with the impact of the trauma myself of just hearing your story, but it didn't end there. You went through all the trial and things, and some things didn't go your way, but somehow in the midst of this, how long ago was this?
2017, 18, one of those. Yeah. January 23rd. I remember the day.
So we're talking about 6-7 years ago.
Yes.
Would you say today that you're whole?
Yes. Yes.
Really?
I did something that most people didn't get a chance to do. I was able to go before the appellate court and plead my own case. So much so that by the time I finished, the lawyer from the county came over and asked me if I was a lawyer. And I said no. And to where even when I got the decision, the judges said that that my case was so, touching, because I asked them, if this was your mom or your sister, how would you have responded?
Yeah.
And because I had the document from the law enforcement acknowledging that, something had been done wrong, which is really, really rare to have that. Yeah. So that's a whole nother story. But having my voice heard, knowing that I stood up for myself. And then I did have some people in the church world. It wasn't that the church abandoned me completely. I do have especially some of my pastors and minister friends, they rallied around me. So I did have that. But I'm talking about just the average person who, and then, and I forgot to say this, people would call me and want to talk about it and then say, oh, wow, that is okay. I'll call you back. Thanks.
Pizza just showed up.
And I mean, you stirred it all up.
Yep.
And now I'm sitting here, and then you say, I'll talk to you later.
Yep.
Or people would say, oh my goodness, I'm going to pray for you. I appreciated that people say, can I pray with you right now?
Yeah, that's much better than I'll be praying for you, because most of the time
that probably never happens.
Yeah. And I think people do that sometimes because they don't know what to say. And so having your friends there with you, who probably at times they just sat in silence because they didn't know what to say either, but having them there. So, and the reason again that I want to dive into this is because this happens to us in ministry all the time.
Yes, yes,
We've been raised to believe that we're not supposed to have problems. We've been raised to believe that if you're a minister or in any form of ministry, that you're supposed to suck it up and be tough and not let anybody
yes.
see any weakness in you. And so we are the ones who often give those pat answers, but we're expected to live by them, and they don't work. So
I
did you?
had been a
So
part
did
of the
you?
church several years ago that we started a ministry called Hugs, Healing Under God's Sovereignty. So I had been on the counseling side of this.
Wow,
So that in turn encouraged me to go find a counselor.
good.
And I did. I went and found someone to talk to, and I needed her to just listen,
Mm-hmm.
not to judge, not to tell me how I felt. And sometimes I'm sure I repeated myself, but I needed to say it until I was tired of saying it.
Mm-hmm.
And she allowed that. And just as God is so good, at the last session, I was transitioning from the church I was in to a new church. And so I told her, I said, and she knew I was feeling better because by then I'm talking about some shoes I bought instead of, or
No
a
problem.
dress or a
Mm-hmm.
movie or a play
Mm-hmm.
that I'd gone to. I was back to normal life
Mm-hmm.
conversation. And she said, you're feeling better. And I said, I am. So I said, I really enjoyed talking to you, but I guess this is kind of time for me to, go back. And I said, oh, by the way, I found a new church. And so she said, where? And I told her, and she just looked at me and smiled. She said, that's my church.
Oh, that's so cool.
So I ended up at the same church that the person who walked beside me today, and she's still my friend.
Yeah,
Yes.
so she's more than your counselor. So I want to ask you this: once you've gone through the initial event, you've gone through all this, I'm assuming the court stuff, all that kind of happened fairly quickly. It didn't
It
happen
took a
quickly.
while.
It took a while.
It,
So the point I was going to is, did you ever hit a point where you just finally it all hit you and you crashed, or did you have time for that?
the only time I really had that moment is the in my sleep deprived days, the first few days, I met a lady who was now one of my very dear friends. She called me and I hadn't been asleep, and they told me there was a meeting at the office and our home office people and our legal department was there, and there was some big change going on in the company. And they were like, I'm a manager, you're supposed to be here. And I went. And as I was pulling into the underground parking, this lady calls me and she said, and she was talking real slow, Dale. She's going, hi, is this Miss Vivica? And I said, yes. And she said, hi, Sugar Plum. And she said, I just wanted to ask you if you would consider being the speaker at my church for Children's Day. And I said, who is this? And so then she told me, and she's talking real calm and real slow,
Mm-hmm.
and she's so gentle, and she's just telling me, now mind you, this is January.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, when is your event? She said, June.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, oh, okay. And so I said, you want me to speak with the children? She said, no, from the pulpit, you'll be giving the service, but it's our anniversary for Children Appreciation Day. I said, how do you know me? She said, I attended one of your conferences. And she said this, the Lord put you on my mind. Mm. There was something about those words that when I pulled into the parking lot, that's when I broke. Because, in the immediate aftermath, I felt I'm the only person on my street that lives alone. Everybody else is coupled, married, families, and you were like, anybody else's house would have had somebody else there to defend them and to help them. And then you say, oh, I don't want to think like that because I don't want this to happen to my neighbor. So you have all of these emotions. And then I'm saying, Lord, where were you? How did you? And when she said, the Lord put you on my mind, it just reminded me that he does see me. Mm-hmm. And that was my breaking moment. From then on, I knew I was going to be okay. And I knew I was going to go through the whatever it was. But that was the moment. And I think the next time when I came back home, and that was the first time. And the second time was when I was at the hotel and I came back and everything in my house was gone. Mm. That was, and the things that they kept, the hard furniture was wrapped in a bubble thing in the middle of the floor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So some of our emotions, some of the way you and I are wired is similar. I wanted to ask you this question. So when she said, the Lord put you on my mind, had you gotten to a point where you thought that maybe he'd forgotten who you were? Because I
This
got there
was
at times.
only
If I'm honest, I got there at
this
times.
was this was within 48 hours of the incident. Matter of fact, it might have been in the first 24 hours. He didn't let me stay there very long because
Okay.
if I'm not mistaken, that was in the middle of the night that happened. And about 10 o'clock is when they called me to come to the office. So
Okay.
I didn't have that abandonment feeling very long. And then I was grateful
hmm
that God reminded me that quickly, that he didn't let that fester and let that
Yeah.
build, that I felt, why me? Where were you? Help me, that kind of thing. So yeah, that came quick.
Okay. Well, you have written a book, I believe, about this, and you're doing seminars. Is that correct? Or teaching about this particular thing? Kind of dive into what you're doing today, to how you've taken something that was horrible and turned it to good, which is what God does.
So I started a series called Valor to Victory.
Okay.
And so Valor to Victory has this story in it, but it also has five other stories. It's six stories total. The subtitle is Removing the Drama from Your Trauma. So the purpose of that book is for me to interview other people who have had a traumatic experience. And in this particular book, it was one incident. I didn't want someone who had an ongoing thing. This one was specifically about someone who had one incident that impacted their lives. And then I had three specific questions that are common in my book is, what did people do to help you? What did someone do that hurt you or disappointed you? And what could someone have done that would have made a difference?
And those questions are after you've had a traumatic experience. So it's not about what happened in the trauma. This is as afterwards. Okay, I'm gonna make sure I'm clear on
Yeah,
that.
because I want to know from hindsight.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's only when you're looking back that you can say, I really wish someone had done this. And to where it's simple things, Dale. If you are in South Carolina and you say, Vivica, when I'm in town, or call me when you need me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sitting here and I'm just gonna say, okay. But if you say, I'm gonna be in LA on October 5th at 9 o'clock, I'm coming by, I'm still gonna just say, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So my thing was to encourage people to just show up in the lives of the people that are going through something. They're not going to dismiss you, but they're also not going to schedule your calendar and say, okay, you know what, I could use you, Thursday at 5.
Mm-hmm.
You're just trying to get through the day. So you're not doing that. And while it sounds good and well-intentioned, it's easier if you make the decision on when you're going to be there, as opposed to asking them to call you when they need you.
So the angle that you're coming from with your ministry today is teaching us how to help people who've been through stuff. It's not necessarily for people who've been through stuff, but it's more for helping people who've been through things. Is that correct?
It's a little bit of both. So
Okay.
In the process, and I went back to school last year and got my master's and my thesis is all on trauma. I have a conference coming up 1 month from today, actually November 4th, called Meet Me at the Well, where we know that what transpired at the well with the woman at the well when she came one way and left another way. So there's these vehicles that have come out of this incident. What my series and what I believe my purpose has become, and God has given me such a sensitivity to, is being honest first that something happened.
Okay.
First acknowledging, because a lot of people have scars and damage that they have never admit that, and especially if you look at them now, they may be very successful in some other way. And you would never know. By doing that, you encourage someone who's still going through it that they can make it through it.
Well, is it true that if you've been through something and you haven't dealt with it, it's still there. You're still dealing with it. It doesn't go away.
Right. So it helps you.
Mm-hmm.
It helps someone else. But in addition to that, Dale, you're going to give advice to people who are trying to help that person. Mm-hmm. Because that was just what I needed. So by me interviewing 6 people, you don't just get my perspective, you get other people's perspective. And my intent and my desire, my prayer would be that out of the list of the advice that these people give you, if you are standing alongside someone that's going through something, that one of them will give you a tip or suggestion that you can say, I hadn't thought about that, but I'm going to use this tip that this person gave me and apply it to my friend who's going through this right now.
The 6 people you talked to, were there common themes or common threads that everybody had? Because I know everybody's story was unique.
In that book, no.
Okay.
In the book that I'm doing now, I'm doing another Valor to Victory series right now, and all the people in the story were homeless. They're not anymore, but there's a commonality. So that is my intention as I increase the book series, is that every book will have a commonality. That first book, Removing the Drama from Your Trauma, was completely random things that happened. One of the ladies had a guy jump in her car and tried to attack her. Another guy who is now a financial, I mean, he's got this huge business in the financial world. When he was switching from working from Los Angeles County actually to starting going into the financial world, and he was getting his second or third master's or something. He was in school, and he had a antique car. And he went somewhere to get, you have to go certain places to get these little parts. And he went somewhere and he got shot in the head.
Oh, my goodness.
And he was in school, and he went through school with a bullet in the back of his head with his eyes closed. And he said he was so grateful that he was an auditory learner versus a visual learner, because he had to remember what he had. And he earned his second master's going through that process. And now he's successful. He jokes about it now. He rides his bikes, and, he has kids, and his kids say, "Dad, I don't feel good today." And he said, "I went to school with a bullet in my head. So tell me, what's going on? What do you don't feel?" And he said, "You always say that, because what tops that?"
That's hard to top that. Now, I will ask you this, because I've seen people who do try to make jokes of or light of things like that. Is there a difference between someone who's gone and worked through their trauma, who makes jokes and light of things, versus someone who hasn't?
Yes. I think that you have to let that person set their tone, because whereas I might be comfortable saying certain things or thinking certain things, it also is the intent and it's the approach. There's a lot of different things. It's the person. If I know you mean me no harm and you say something to me, it's not going to be offensive. As a matter of fact, it's interesting you say that, because not long ago, probably about a year ago, somebody that I work with, and I hadn't talked to him in years, and he called me to ask me a question. And then he said, "Whatever happened to that guy that came in your house?" And I said, "What?" And it was so random.
Yeah.
And he said, "What happened to the guy?" And I said, "I don't know." And he said, "Yeah, because, he came in your house and he got away with it." And he just started talking. And I said 3 times, "I don't want to talk about that right now." And he kept going. And then he kind of laughed. And so I ended up having to have a conversation with him. And I said, "Let me call you back." And then I said, "Look, don't ever approach me like that again." And he said, "Oh, I didn't mean, you didn't ask me how I was doing. You asked me how he was doing." And I said, "And then you laughed as if there was something humorous about it." I had all kinds of strange things. I had somebody.
So with that guy, do you think, was he just being nosy, or was he, that just seems so inappropriate.
It was.
Okay.
And I don't know. I hadn't talked to him in years, so I don't know. But
or maybe he just thought you were just fine now, like it never happened. Isn't that what people think the goal is that you get to a place where it never happened? And the fact about trauma is that's never what happens as far as dealing with it. It's always there. You just got to replace it with an escape or a better thought, but it doesn't just go away. It seems like we live in that fairy tale world a lot.
I think so. I think, and the guy, I've known him 4 years. I don't talk to him regularly, but he's not like a malicious guy. And I really don't know where that came from. I don't know what prompted him to approach me like that. But so there's an ebb and a flow, a yin and a yang, or however you want to put it, to where there might be something that you can say about it. I don't know how humorous it would ever be.
I can't find a vein where it would be humorous. No.
Yes.
So before we run out of time, give us some specifics of what we can do to help people, or even help ourselves, if we've had traumatic events and I love the title. In fact, we'll call the podcast this, to help us remove the drama from our trauma. What's your intent even in that title?
Because I think that we magnify it in our minds. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we have to, what I had to stop and realize, Dale, that in spite of everything that happened, there was a lot of things that didn't happen. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I didn't get beaten. Mm-hmm. I didn't get raped. Mm-hmm. I didn't get killed. You know what I mean? I didn't end up in the hospital. Actually, nothing in my house was damaged beyond the blood damage. I had a vase that I had just taken from my grandmother, who had just passed, that was sitting on the coffee table. It did get broken. So I had to stop and think about all of the things that didn't happen. And that's where I said, okay, Lord, I can see where your protection was
Mhm.
in the midst of this. So what I would tell anyone is be honest with yourself about whatever it is you're feeling and allow yourself to feel it. You give yourself permission to be angry, to be afraid, to be, whatever it is that you're feeling. And then if you can't find someone to listen to you, seek help. There is nothing wrong with going to a therapist, going to a counselor, or, a psychologist, psychiatrist, whatever you need to get through it, because that's the only way you're going to get through
Totally
it.
agree. Counseling is the only reason I'm sitting here talking to you now, because I just got to a point where I snapped. I mean, when I went through the last near drowning experience, it was just like I'm done, because it was like, okay, is life just had no foundation. It had no
Wow.
security in it. Went for me, and so going to counseling is really what helped me do that. Don't you think in the church world though, so many people give us these pat answers, and it just really doesn't it make the pain worse when you, like, again, I remember I grew up in a traditional church, and for a while we went to a non-denominational church, and and one of the things that we did believed in at that church, it was divine healing, which, I mean, I believe in healing,
Mm-hmm.
but it was just like, if someone even said, we'll pray for so and so, they got cancer, they'll say, oh, don't say that, don't confess
Yeah.
that or whatever, and I'm like, that doesn't solve the problem. You're trying to pretend it's not there. And I think
Right.
sometimes in the church world, because we really are more used to just coming in, experiencing church and going out, where it's not relational, that we don't take the time to find out what people are going through. Because if you do, that may require more of your time. Isn't that true?
Yes. Yes. And then don't commit something that you're not going to do.
That's good.
Just, yeah. If you, and then don't expect them to tell you what they need. If my dishes are still sitting in the sink and I just go and sit down because I just don't have the whatever that moment, I'm not going to ask you to come and do my dishes. But if you just were at my house, you would see the dishes there, put them in the dishwasher, and I'd be grateful for it later.
Yeah.
Today, the dishes don't matter to me. So that's why I think it's important that you show up. If you are allowed, if you have a relationship with someone, to make sure that that person is not alone, not to hear their story, not to ask them how they feel, but just be present. Just kind of walk them through.
We could adopt the philosophy, it's not about me. That would help a lot. When you're
Yes.
trying to help someone, uh, here you are, you share your story with someone, and then they begin just to go off and start talking about their story. It's like, okay,
Oh
you
my
know,
God, that is such a. And then you know what else, Dale? People started sending me stories, even like when it hit the news, they would send me stories and Insta on my on Messenger and things.
uh,
Oh, this happened. Somebody broke in, and it's the same thing. Just first, I don't want to read 20 other stories about people that have had a
nope,
home invasion, and then it caused me to say that's not the same thing. This person wasn't even at home. They had a home, and it would you say that doesn't mirror my story,
yep,
and I don't know. I don't know where people just felt like they wanted to kind of keep doing that and telling me how it happened. But at the end of the day, I think that everything that we go through is not necessarily just for us, but it's for us and someone else. And
mhm,
so in hindsight, if I can, I would love to be able to go through, talk to churches. I've set up a program now that I'm working with TM Transformation, well, actually with
mhm,
Elena, and presenting it to them and through my church and with Nicole on how to get this communication where not just in the church, but even in corporate America, of how to deal with people who are going through trauma or who have gone through.
mhm,
In corporate America, sometimes you have it as a woman. If she's in a male-oriented environment,
mhm.
she may be less likely to admit something because
Her
they
job's
already
tied to
want
it. Her job's
her
tied to it.
job's
I
tied
get it.
to it.
Hmm.
Men don't want to admit it because they're men, so they
Hmm.
don't want to admit that anything is bothering them. So
Yeah.
you have everyone hiding and everyone pretending and all these facades. And I think that's why we're imploding.
Yeah. Well, when you do one of your next books, it could be just about pastors, and I'll be one of your trauma guests on that one, because every one of us have stories to share. But before we wrap up today, I want to ask you to do me a favor. I want you to just think a moment. Okay, so you're sitting down with a pastor or a leader of a church. The last 3 years have been horrible for, especially in the space that we're in at 95 Network, where we work with small and mid-sized churches, because basically, oftentimes the pastors they're isolated. and every
Right.
decision they made was wrong, and they took all the bullets. The brunt of everybody was aimed at them, and they
Yes.
are overwhelmed, and their church is not growing, and their marriage is not doing well, and they have nobody to talk to, and they
Mhm.
are living every day in the weight and the pressure of this trauma. If you had a chance to sit down with them having coffee and they opened up and talked to you and shared that story, what would you tell
Mhm.
them?
I don't know what I would tell them more so than I would listen.
Okay.
I think that pastors are isolated sometimes. And first, having a confidant, having someone that they can just be themselves to, because people have an expectation that the pastor has no problems and they just burden him and layer and layer and layer. Everybody thinks he can be all things to all people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes pastor needs a resting place.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as far as guidance, I would prompt them with questions. What do you feel? How do you feel? Because I think just acknowledging that that's how you really feel, and again, just giving yourself permission to really feel that.
So we need to hear that, because I know for me it was like, okay, I know I feel a certain way, but I'm not supposed to say it. I'm a pastor. I'm a
Right.
minister. I'm a man of God or whatever. And it's like, you still feel what you feel, you know?
Well, if you stop that sentence and think about it, you said man of God. The first word in that was man.
Mm-hmm.
You're just a man.
That's right.
Before you are a man of the cloth, before you are a man who's a lawyer, a man who's a doctor, a man, you're a man. I am a one man. We are in humanity, and in humanity, there's problems, there's pain, and our position does not make us immune to that.
Yeah.
So that's what I think, that just sitting with pastors is first admit that you are carrying something and that you want to lay it down, and just admit that. You don't have to be transparent enough, or not I shouldn't say transparent. You don't have to share your story with everyone, but you do need to share it with someone. You
I did
need,
a did a webinar today or yesterday, excuse me, when we recorded this, and one of the we were doing this kind of back and forth thing, and one of the questions that I received from a pastor, he's probably my age, probably he's in his 60s, and he's like, "So tell me, who am I supposed to talk to? Who am I
yes,
supposed to go to? I mean, because
yes,
if I tell my friends, they'll leak it out. I don't have anyone I can trust." Uh,
exactly.
that's been a common thing, but that's not good enough. And what I mean by that is we can't let that be the excuse that we don't get help.
Yes, yes. I mean, I always say I have two ears, so I can listen
Mm-hmm.
to anything, and that's my life goal at this point. Just even globally, I've had the opportunity to travel outside of America quite frequently, and the stories are the same.
Mm-hmm.
The pain is the same.
Mm-hmm.
The disappointment is the same. It's people that are hurting, and we're in this toxic environment between, our politics and our governments and our racial inequality, our gender. Everything is under attack.
Yep.
Everything is just, erupting, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
and there's not really a lot of safe landing places. And to where my goal is to create those environments, to create places where people can just be.
Yeah.
That was the event that I'm doing, like I said, next month at my church, the Second Baptist Church in Santa Ana, is Meet Me at the Well. And that is the intent, is for collectively for us to come together, have a few people that are going to share their stories, but then for that one is particular for women, um, to have an exchange, bring it to the altar. But as far as pastors who are behind the scenes, it's difficult for them to continue to be able to help someone else when they're carrying something themselves. You can't just keep, what is it, pouring new wine into old wineskins. It's
They
going to
break.
start leaking.
They can't handle the
Yeah.
pressure. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, here's the thing. If you want to be a healer, you got to walk in health. You got to get healed, and it's very difficult to be a healer if
Amen.
you're living every day under the oppression of traumatic events that have happened in your life. I want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to share with us today. I'm very grateful for the fact that you're you have a bubbly, upbeat personality after you've been through what you've been through. That just shows me that Jesus has done a great thing in your life.
Yes,
And if it's cool with you, I want to put your email address in the show notes, just in case anybody does want to reach out to you, get in contact with you. Maybe somebody just wants to talk to you.
Okay.
Would
That
you
would
be
be
willing to
fine.
do that? Okay, cool. Well,
Absolutely.
thank you
Thank
again
you so
so
much,
much.
Dale.
You have been such a blessing, and I just see the grace of God in your life, and it's very encouraging. So again, thanks for joining me.
And I look forward to having you on my show.
Can't wait.
Thanks for listening to the 95 Podcast. We look forward to sharing another episode with you next week. In the meantime, visit our website at 95network.org. The website is loaded with great resources created for small and mid-sized church leaders. Until next time, have a great week.